Welcome back to Metaphysical Girl, a podcast about art and esoterica. I'm your host, Saint, internationally best-selling author and lifelong student of religion, folklore, and ritual. I'm absolutely excited to be here today with a dear friend, a poet I admire very much, and an accomplished spiritual director, Rachel Parsons, pen name Theodora Thomas, if you know her from her poetry. This is definitely an episode to warm up your winter as we get into the erotic and the divine, devotional, sexy poetry, and all of the subversive outlets that we found for sensuality and sexuality growing up in really repressive evangelical paradigms. We also talk about the ins and outs of spiritual direction and why attending to your mental and spiritual health is so important in these trying times. If you love gay mystics, Teresa of Avila, Jesus is My Boyfriend worship music, punk rock, lesbianism, Jean Donne, and Sufjan Stevens, this episode might be for you. So please get your pencils out and get ready to take notes, because after this episode, you are going to have a laundry list of erotic poetry recommendations. Without further ado, let's get metaphysical. So, Rachel, how does it feel to be here today on the pod?
Darling dear, I'm thrilled. This is truly, Saint and I have been talking about how this podcast is a culmination of everything that we've been moving towards spiritually and creatively for the better part of a decade, and it just feels true.
It really just feels true. We're finally combining all of our passions and interests into some really beautiful things. Would you please introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do to our beautiful listeners?
So I am an interfaith and interspiritual spiritual director. And spiritual direction is basically therapy for your spiritual life. It's not psychological counseling, but it has all the sights and smells of a therapy session. But we're talking about your unique spiritual path. So there isn't a specific dogma that's being pushed or anything like that. But it's this lovely neutral space to figure out what you really believe, what kind of practices you want to have, how you want to integrate your spirituality into the rest of your life. It is the love of my life. So grateful that this field exists at all. I'm also a poet, and I'm deeply in love with the mystics, particularly the erotic mystics across spiritual traditions across the world. Poetry has become this lovely expression of that love, and also in my teeny tiny way, my way of continuing that work. So, yeah.
That's amazing. It sounds like you have this really dynamic spiritual profession that you work in, but you also are integrating your own spiritual experiences into art and into things that are really embodied. Would you tell the people a little bit about ecstatic dance? I know that you do that for the love of the game, but it's something I think is really cool.
No, absolutely. Well, I'm sure I'll get more into this later, but to the extent I dabbled with the Pentecostals in my religious upbringing, I found myself deeply desiring to dance in worship settings. All the warts of my religious upbringing aside, I was always in situations where that was pretty welcome. I was pretty solo in that effort and pretty conspicuous, but always welcome to do it. And I was writing about that in a paper that I wrote for a dance class in college, and my teacher told me about ecstatic dance, and I was like, wonderful news, that's exactly what I want. A space where people are integrating spiritually and expressing spiritually through free movement, but everybody else is doing it, and it's not this awkward, conspicuous situation. I used to lead an ecstatic dance group once a month.
I've done it with you. It was super fun. It was awesome.
I still offer it, as requested. I'll guide people if they, request a class or something. But for the most part, it's just my own spiritual practice. It still is one of the most integrated, holistic, lovely expressions of spirituality that I have found.
I love that so much. As someone who feels really, really passionately about somatic integration with spirituality and how so much of our wisdom and our spiritual intuition lives in our body. Some of my first entry points into using that language around spirituality and experience things more deeply in my own body were through my friendships with you. It's one of the reasons that I find our spiritual friendship to be such a beautiful thing because, spoiler alert listener, Rachel is my spiritual director. Plot twist.
Conflict of interest.
For the court of record, how long have you been my director? I see you like quarterly, sometimes more, sometimes less.
I think I practiced on you also.
You did. I was your beautiful guinea pig.
Yeah, no, that must have been like 2014 or something.
Oh, we're still going strong. But before we continue on, could you tell us a little bit about your spiritual background, building blocks you were given in childhood and into your teen years that you've then rearranged or maybe even gotten rid of in the building of your spiritual life?
I grew up big bad evangelical, but it was an interesting expression of it because it was very liturgical. It was the Episcopal Church pre-early 2000s split, which in my little Florida town was traditionally evangelical in the sense that one of my earliest memories of church was being horrified that my Sunday school teacher told me that I would have to go try to convert people. In the early 2000s, there was a big split in the Episcopal Church because there was an openly gay bishop that was ordained. My congregation went the conservative route, which laid some lovely, deep-seated influences in my queer little mind as a fourth grader. All of that aside, I do honestly look back on my religious upbringing as a whole as pretty positive. I think I just learned lovely skills around community, how to be a good friend. I've always been a spiritually oriented person, and that's what spirituality was as it was offered to me. I was like, wonderful, I'm all in, let's do it. After that, I was at a non-denominational church in Asheville with our dear host. That's a whole podcast in and of itself.
We'll see if I redact the name of the church. I met you fresh at 17 when you were a long-locked, open-hearted Jesus is my boyfriend worship leader, with also a boyfriend. Hilarious considering the lesbianism. We were at the same evangelical church, and it was one of those very early 2010s kind of hipster-flavored aesthetics of progressivism, feeling like it's grassroots, feeling like it's all about community building, but built on an incredibly conservative dogma. And for the listener at home, if any of you have a background with this is Mark Driscoll's Acts 29 movement. Famously was removed from his position at Mars Hill Church because he was an asshole to women, to the people who worked with him, to his wife, to strangers online. As you can tell, I heavily dislike this man. So that's a little bit about where we were, the soup that we were being boiled in together, just holding hands like lobsters in a pot.
It truly was the heat slowly increasing on a frog in a pot situation. We will lure you in with mandolin. I feel like Mumford & Sons was in their heyday at the time. We'll have fancy fair trade coffee and the whole deal. And then teach you the most brazenly sexist and homophobic theology you could imagine.
For reference, this is the place where I was baptized in a horse trough to the sound of mandolin and folk fiddle. And then shortly thereafter, while having a meeting with the pastor, because I was enthusiastic about pastoral care and theology, told him that I was considering becoming a pastor and that I wanted to go to seminary. That was when he dropped the, "Oh, I love that for you, but we actually don't ordain women here, and I can't sign off on that. We cannot publicly or privately support you, but if you really decide to do that, I can't stop you."
Thanks, Dad.
Read the statement of faith about the churches online. Call them, grill them, make them talk about their theology.
Anyway, survived that. And went to Denver Seminary straight from there after I graduated college. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, but again, I was always very spiritually oriented. Hilariously, right before I enrolled in this very conservative seminary, I realized that I, in fact, was queer, and then had to sign a pledge that I wouldn't do any gay shit while I was there. And I was like, what's...
Oh my God. I forgot about the pledge.
Yes. While I was there over those 2 years, it really was the pressure cooker I needed to confront the stuff that I just truly did not believe and to confront what I considered the greatest minds in the field with my questions and doubts, and was repeatedly deeply unimpressed with their answers. The whole place was riddled with confirmation bias, circular reasoning, and all of that. I have this beautiful memory after graduating. I was at an amphitheater right next to the seminary. seminary, and Joan Jett was playing, and she played Crimson and Clover, and I was dancing my gay little heart out with the seminary in view, just like, baby, we made it! Gonna go gay now. It was so lovely.
It's beautiful. I think that even in the absolute depths of the teenage closet, witnessing Joan Jett play Crimson and Clover could have sprung the lock on that door.
At that point, I still considered myself garden variety Christian, but certainly not Protestant and certainly not evangelical. Since then, it's just been this really lovely, slow massaging into a more interfaith, interspiritual posture. I think if you were to pin me in a corner and demand I tell you my beliefs, first I would get turned on, and then I would tell you that I'm an atheist. Find so much value in spiritual practice and in the mythology of world religions, or as I like to call it, my reality fan fiction. I don't feel this need to be perfectly cognitively consonant about every single aspect of my life. I think if I derive joy from Christian contemplative mysticism, you'd better bet I'm going to drink that to the lees, whether I believe it or not. Yes, I think my practices are largely Christian mystic, pagan, and then just heavy appreciation and influence from Sufi Islam and Hinduism and pretty much anything else. I'm having a good time.
Your phrase about the fan fiction really resonated with me. Someone told me this one time, and it is the most true thing ever. They were like, I know that your passion for religion, there's like very genuine elements of devotion there, but you also know it's just your favorite fandom, right? Like, I need to know you know that. And I was like, oh, I know.
Oh, truly.
I know the lore. I own the trading cards. I have fan theories.
Well, absolutely.
People who are in spiritual care fields, we often see them as kind of like a monolith who is like doing religion, quote unquote, right, or has it figured out. And all of us are constantly evolving, experiencing life in formation. I think it's really important to remind them that the people who are taking care of you spiritually are also people. What's the breakdown like for people that you work with who are categorically intertraditional religion, who are more agnostic, who are maybe pagan, or who are even atheist? I would imagine that you have a pretty diverse clientele.
Yeah, I think broad brush, it's a lot of very progressive Christians, people who are deconstructing really any faith, but largely Christianity, just because America. And even the people who would consider themselves Christians have a pretty open-handed relationship with it and don't see it as, the only true faith or anything like that. Plenty of spiritual but not religious types, agnostic, pagan, overwhelmingly queer. I could count on one hand the amount of straight clients I have. Yeah, progressive clergy as well.
The first place that I experienced spiritual direction as the directee outside of working with you was when I was training to be a priest. For the listener, I have a master's degree in theological studies from Princeton Theological Seminary. And when I first got there, I thought I wanted to be an Episcopal priest. All of my friends who are doing pastoral care, who ended up following that path, are in direction. And if we have someone who's not, we're like, you need to get in direction. Like, you need to take care of yourself. My experience has always felt like having someone there who is like midwifing me through this process, who has this expertise, but who is letting me lead, letting me set the pace, and being there to witness that and to get me through all the growing pains and bring in skills or tools or strategies as needed. Some of the things that I have done with you before are Ignatian-style imaginative meditation prayer, do a lot of body scan stuff. Sometimes I'm vision questing with you, and sometimes I'm just venting about the week. For anyone who's in a season of spiritual transition, who wants to go deeper with their spirituality, who's exploring a new spiritual path and discerning if it's right for them, maybe who's experiencing a pinch point moment where they need extra spiritual support, finding someone with a suite of tools that is complementary to you is really important. Also, many directors do offer a free first session, so if you're interested in working with someone like Rachel, if you wanted to go to fratreste.com and explore the offerings, good opportunity to go in and see if it's a good fit.
Could you spell Fratreste for the good people?
Absolutely. They probably can't spell that, can they?
I can't either.
We'll put that in the show note if you don't speak Latin.
It's so embarrassing if you don't speak Latin. Oh my God.
Leave me alone. I'm learning Latin recreationally because I need enrichment in my tiger cage. It's FRATRESDEI.com. Fratreste, which means
siblings of divinity, which I chose to evoke a sense of divine companionship rather than a top-down hierarchical understanding of faith.
Spiritual relationship anarchy is so hot to me. I did say something earlier that maybe not every listener has familiarity with when I was talking about the somatic element of spiritual direction. So I'm going to tee you up and give you an opportunity to define that term.
Somatic is just a pretentious word for bodily. When I was practicing my skills on Saint and we did some somatic work, at the end, after a long period of silence, she said, "You're a body witch!" And I think about that once a month. In spiritual directions, so much of what we're doing is trying to figure out what you truly think about things or your understanding of yourself, the universe, divinity, whatever. And the body is such a lovely, quick way to do that. Integrating the body into spiritual practice is an end in of itself because we're trying to integrate ourselves with a larger whole. The body is just as much a part of that as anything else. Typically in a session, we would either start with the cognitive or the somatic and then flow to the other one. So if there's something specific you're trying to think about, discern, a decision you're trying to make, something like that, we would bring that question to the attention of your body and see how different things respond. If you feel a tightness in your chest, we would listen to that sensation and learn what it's trying to communicate. The different parts of your body hold information just in the same way that your brain does. And sometimes we can start with the somatic, if you're just feeling a strange pain or something that isn't explained medically. Just listening to that, seeing if it has anything that it's trying to communicate, because largely sensation is just communication. And so all we're doing really is an active translation between physical sensation and the English language. Since the body is happy to speak to us, it just doesn't speak English or whatever our native tongue is.
When we first started working together, I would often come to you with cognitive issues, intellectual frustrations, or theological questions that I was wrestling with. And we would move that through the body and do the integration that way. And we still do that, but now more I'm bringing you things that are very, I guess, carnal, very nervous system-y, and we start there and work backwards. Rachel will be able to move my attention towards that and kind of slow me down and sink deeper into it. I tend to feel anger and shame as a pain in like the base of my spine and the small of my back. And I brought that. I didn't even have a lot of intellectual thoughts about it. I think I opened the session with being like, this wants attention. It won't go away. Let's give it the attention and see where it takes us, which ended up being a really juicy, beautiful session. So you're a body witch.
Yes.
You're so hot. All my friends are so hot. So much of your spiritual life is expressed and reflected through the prism of poetry. You also have a music background. What is the experience of being a poet and a spiritual poet as well?
Yeah, it is such a direct expression of so much of what we've already talked about with spiritual direction. Even with the somatic stuff, we talked about the active translation, going from raw sensation to the written word or the spoken word. In my practice of poetry, it is so parallel to how I move about the world spiritually too, because there is that sinking into intuition, more mysterious, sacred, whatever we want to call it, space within us. If there's a topic I want to write about, I'll go into what I call the sanctum, my heart space. And as I would in direction, notice what images come to mind, words, pictures, whatever, even if they're super abstract. I'll use those images to craft the poem.
It's interesting that you talk about that heart space, because for me, poetry feels a lot like channeling. Fiction doesn't always. I'll hit a moment where I'm in the flow, I'm getting a download. But when I am moved to write poetry, it feels like something is moving through me that demands expression. Like there is something divine or like a genus spirit or, the genus loci or a daemon. That is really when I resonate with that archetypal and esoteric language that is used so often with artists. Then my job is to go back and edit it with a more sober mind to get it to be the piece that I want it to be. But that first draft is always so raw. It feels so channeled. And I remember the exact headspace and emotion and spiritual frequency that I was on when I wrote that first draft.
Yes. It's such a combination of feeling so deeply in tune with yourself, but also yourself as an expression of the greater universe.
As above, so below, baby.
Truly. Like, I think if you were to track it scientifically, there'd probably be tidy data as to why whatever chemicals made whatever happen within me. But
Mm.
experientially, there's also this sense of receiving this from some external mysterious force. And
Yeah.
allowing both of those postures to exist together harmoniously is how I want to move through the world.
Poetry feels like the most real encounter with the sublime that I tend to have in
Mhm.
writing. And it feels like the closest that I can get to capturing and expressing the sublime and bringing other people into that experience with me. It's this word that comes from art or literature, particularly romanticism, which is the feeling, the whole body sensation evoked when you encounter something that is utterly beyond you and beautiful and terrifying. If we have secret history fans in the house, this is beauty is terror. Whatever we call beautiful, we cower before it. This is how you feel when you're standing in front of the ocean. This is how you feel when you're in love in that way that is actually very terrifying. It's how you
Mm.
feel in those brief glimpses that we sometimes get in our life of like, I think that was God. It's that feeling of awe and drawing into the heart of something deep and dark and beyond you and enveloping and beautiful. And those are sensations that have so shaped my life that I seek and I chase out and I'm always trying to capture. I work in the Gothic, which is a genre that's very interested in the sublime. And I have a lot of tools in the Gothic to do that. But poetry always feels like the most direct way to get to the heart of that experience. Poetry that I have read in my life, some of my absolute favorites, like Tim Riggins speaks of waterfalls or Monet refuses the operation. That is also when I have encountered the sublime just in the written word. It's very powerful.
I think when I am opening myself to that posture of being receptive towards the universe or what have you, there is such a surrender that I have to go into. Even if it feels safe to do so, there's a weight to it, perhaps a sacrifice. And I think that posture lends itself to the erotic so seamlessly. Being able to surrender to the weight of the sublime while knowing that it will fill you with its riches if you do so. There's trust, there's give and take, there's all these things.
This podcast is very concerned with the erotic. I could yap on and on about that, but I would love you to tell me a little bit about what the erotic means to you in the context of art, particularly the discipline of poetry, because you mentioned erotic poetry as being a subgenre that you work in. Hello, Seekers. Saint here to remind you very quickly that Metaphysical Girl is a listener-supported podcast. So if you like what you hear here, please follow this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and consider joining the Metaphysical Girl community over on Substack at saint.substack.com. That's where you can get access to twice monthly long-form essays, private tarot readings with me, and of course, the Metaphysical Girl After Dark episodes, where we go darker, deeper, and a little bit more mystical with the subject matter. Thank you for listening and for all of your support.
Spirituality and the erotic are so harmonious because they both have to do with ecstatic union. Spirituality takes infinite forms, of course, but largely there is some question of who am I in relation to other things underpinning every spiritual tradition. And erotic energy is this inherently connective energy, and not just necessarily through sexuality, but sensuality, connecting with the sensory aspects of everything around you and being able to blur the lines between yourself and your surroundings. Like if you eat a salad, you've blurred the lines between you and the salad. I think all of that is very erotic. Unfortunately, so many institutions of religion try to stomp out the sensual and the sexual. But when that isn't happening, I think there is such a lovely, seamless integration of all of those energies, being able to embrace erotic energy as part of the universe as much as anything else. And it's so synonymous with life and vitality too, whether
Mhm.
it's, reproduction or blood rushing energy.
I see desire as sort of a compass needle pointing us towards our highest good. I mean, the deepest, brightest burning forms of desire. This is very Ignatian, believe it or not. And I think of eroticism as being this life force, this engine within us. This can take the form of creating art or sexuality or love or romance or caretaking. But it is that creative, generative, fiery, passionate desire to live. It's life, more life. That to me is very, very erotic. The famous quote, which I, of course, know from a fantastic Janelle Monáe song, but which I believe is earlier. It may be Oscar Wilde, it may be not. Everything is about sex, except sex, which is about power. And my version of that I often tell myself in my writing as a guiding light, is everything is about sex, except sex, which is about power, except power, which is about surrender, which is actually about God, which then just comes back to sex because God is about sex. So it's actually a sexy little Ouroboros that is eating its tail, and we're just riding the wheel, baby. Art allows us to express a level of erotic curiosity and exploration that is sometimes hard to experience in life, not even necessarily because the option isn't there, but because we're limited humans in like one body experiencing one day at a time. But art totally throws the doors of perception wide open.
Think about my adolescence and the sexual repression of Christianity, and certainly queer sexual repression. As a silver lining, ultimately I wish it was very different. But within that space, I was able to find eroticism in expressions of art and spirituality. It's a joke at this point, but the whole Jesus is my boyfriend thing from the early aughts. Well, I guess since the Mystics forever, actually. This is not new.
We just keep reinventing Hildegard of Bingen.
Honestly, we just put skateboard shoes on him. I have this very distinct memory of being in my bed listening to the worship song, but it kind of had sultry instrumentation and just moving around really freely and feeling very sensual and all these sorts of things in a way that didn't make me feel like I was doing the bad that youth group was telling me I can't do. I wish I had not been told that sexuality was bad, but it is lovely that we have all of these ways in which erotic energy is going to be expressed somehow. And we have so many examples of that being expressed through atrocities and these more positive expressions of spirituality, creativity, whatever.
We talked about this in an essay that I recorded a podcast episode. It's an essay on the fashion and psychoanalysis exhibit at the FIT, and I'm talking about kink and fetish in it, and basically saying that if more people expressed their eroticism through the theater of kink rather than the theater of war, we might have a slightly better society. I think repression, as you said, it can lead to such destruction of the self and the other. It just can really corrode inside you. Eroticism that has no outlet, when it can't be expressed without shame, it rots inside you. It really does some damage, whether to the person or to the people that you're trying to be in relationship with. I also, on a lighter note, do jokingly, although it's not a joke, say that I'm in an on again, off again, under negotiated BDSM relationship with God.
Oh, absolutely. We're in the same polycule.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I knew this was true. I could just sense it. We're splitting time. You're in his Google Calendar, and I'm like, who are they? You're always with them.
My sister in Christ, my metamour.
My sister, wife in Christ.
Exactly.
And I completely resonate with what you're saying about this because I also grew up in conservative Southern white American evangelicism, which is incredibly hostile to sexuality, queerness, and just the feminines. Religion was always a place where I felt free and I had that outlet of sensuality and carnality and emotional extremes and the tension of power and surrender. And it's not that it was a replacement for sex or that the religion was just me trying to have a sexual experience. It's that it was a place where it was safe to experience and feel these things before I had other outlets. And similar to what you were saying about this free-flowing expression of sexuality, I do think religion was the first place in which I experienced the theater of kink, which is true for many people. I have more surfaced and aware and intentional and shame-free places to be on that stage and explore that theater now. But I am very grateful for that. It comes up in my work a lot. I think I see those connections very clearly, and I think that those elements deepen my spirituality and even very earnest elements of my devotion. It's just a component of the spiritual experience. To go back to the mystics and the Jesus is my boyfriend, you could argue that for many people, religion, or to use very evangelical language, your personal relationship with God does and can have a sexual or romantic component. We have so much literature about people becoming husbands and brides of Christ in monasteries and convents, or suffering or surrendering themselves to God or experiencing the Holy Spirit in these very sexual ways. I just find that endlessly fascinating. fascinating. Do you have erotic poets or erotic poems that are your favorite if the folks wanted to go read a little bit of something to spice up their life, as it were?
Oh, absolutely. We, of course, have homegirl of all homegirls, Saint Teresa of Avila. There's, of course, the very famous passage where she's being repeatedly impaled by an angel and talking about the agony being so heavenly and her never wanting it to stop and her heart to never be filled with anything except God. Banger.
For the listener at home that can't see my face, I am rolling my eyes and chewing on a pencil as though I am watching James Spader in Secretary right now.
I straight up have a votive candle for Teresa of Avila burning a foot away from me. And certainly the poems of Hafiz. He's a Sufi Islam poet. Saint John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul, more contemporary, Sufjan Stevens. The song Saturn by Sufjan Stevens is load-bearing in my spiritual life. For the ex-youth group Kids in Our Midst, All Around Me by Flyleaf. Actually, Phantom of the Opera and the song Music of the Night is a deeply spiritually meaningful song for me in terms of spiritual union, surrender, all those things. A toxic relationship with God, the whole thing.
Under negotiated, on again, off again, BDSM relationship with God.
Say it again. People in the back.
Sing it, baby. Also, a slut for John Donne.
Of course.
Particularly, batter my heart, three-personed God, imprison me, for I except you enthrall me, shall never be free, nor ever chaste except you ravish me.
Stop it.
Baby boy was a freak. That's a grade A lover boy freak. I know one when I see one.
Absolutely.
She hasn't written this kind of poetry in a while, but there's an author who writes under Not Because of Victories. Her name is Sarah. She has an amazing collection called It Begins in a Garden, one of the best collections of religious prose poetry and mythological Bible fan fiction, feelings about God poetry. As far as fiction, I mean, you got to read your Sierra Simone. All of her books are heavily horny and religious and theological. It's just never not going to be there, which I do respect. But the Priest series in particular is really excellent. I feel like I'm missing someone huge.
Theodora Thomas.
And my good personal friend, poetic luminary Theodora Thomas. I was going to ask you, Theo, if you don't mind, do you have a poem you want to share with us?
Don't make me sing.
Don't make me sing. I want your horniest poem about God.
Horniest? Maybe.
I mean, anything that feels... You could say you could let the spirit move through you.
That's true. I do have one.
I'd love to hear it.
Thank you. I don't trust myself around you. We walked as one flesh as I covered my ears, blocking the cacophony of thought. My feet filled with splinters from scraping the fence between belief and not. I the chosen, you the lot. The splinters overtook my feet and spread to every limb, settling my trunk, rooting me down. White knuckles softened to green leaves, breezily receiving photons. We are as one flesh, stroking the chasm between belief and not. You the chosen, I the God.
That was gorgeous. Thank you. That's one of my personal favorites. Is there a place where folks can read your poems if they're interested?
Yes, my quest this year is to release my chapbook called OMFG, Poems About Queer Sex, God, and Queer Sex with God. Hopefully the cover will feature the Teresa of Avila sculpture that is a depiction of the passage I was talking about earlier. Me and my partner are going to pose as them in a kinky fashion. It's going to be delish. I'm so...
You didn't tell me that part.
Yeah, surprise. You're learning here on air on the Metaphysical Girl Pod. But if you want a preview, my Instagram is Theodora Thomas Poetry. You can follow me there for updates about the chapbook and all that. And probably some pictures of my side boob if you're interested.
Baby, I'm so interested. And
Yeah.
I hope those artful pictures of side boob are tucked like lithographs in between the pages of the final chapbook. I'm not sure if that's allowed or in the budget, but know that I'm asking for it now.
I'll discuss it with the board.
You're a jack of many trades, and you have your hands in a lot of pies. You're always giving, like, cool friend's older brother who just, like, plays guitar and skateboards and rock climbs energy.
It's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me.
You're welcome. I have to really make sure that we secure the lesbianism allegations with this podcast because we
Yeah.
can't let them die. They've been going for so long, and we just need to feed the fire occasionally. That is the archetype that you occupy psychosexually in my mind.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You've talked about also being kind of a transcendent, sometimes divine experience, even in the sense of humanistic connection, is your involvement in the punk scene. You've performed some of your poetry live at punk shows. You go to punk shows. So tell me a little bit about what draws you to that scene.
At the risk of being not like other girls about this, while I deeply love my beloved ecstatic dance, there is a culture around it that can be pretty twee and precious, green tea on a mountaintop kind of energy. And I think that punk is this wonderful response to that in my recreational interests, where it is so much of what we're doing in ecstatic dance in terms of free expression, letting the body, writhe about as it wants, but with a grit and a real openness to the full spectrum of human emotion, which certainly things like anger and intensity can be an ecstatic dance. But I'm speaking in real broad strokes with this. But I think that there is so much beautiful alchemy in a punk show where even if you're singing about deeply dark topics, everybody is writhing and singing and screaming about those topics at the top of their lungs and getting so much out that it actually ends up being a deeply wholesome and warm communal experience. And there are plenty of exceptions with that. I tend to roll in the queer feminist punk scenes. There's certainly very unhealthy strands of punk. But yeah, with the physical movement, the consensual shoving and jostling and violence of a mosh pit, I mean, certainly there's plenty of kink crossover there. Sometimes at a punk show, I experience the full spectrum of human experience in roughly 2 hours. Just every single emotion, a sense of connectivity inside and connectivity with things outside, positive and negative, difficult and beautiful. Wear your earplugs, kids, take care of yourself. I'm currently nursing a sprained wrist because of a mosh pit. I regret nothing, but take care of yourself. But yeah.
It is the most aura farming way that you could have sprained that wrist, though.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
You're
that.
so welcome. Well, Rachel, this was super gorgeous. Thank you so much for coming on the pod today. As you know, I'm obsessed with you, and I know that the audience will be too, but you just occupy so many interesting intersections of what Metaphysical Girl is all about. So it's been truly a treat to have you on.
Thank you so much.
May I find you in many podcasts and many lifetimes talking about gay sex with God.
When I say it is the deepest pleasure of my heart to be here with you, I do mean that. It sometimes is unclear whether or not the artist whose art you love is a good person or not. And I would just like to be on record as confirming that whatever your rosiest, most idealized picture of S.T. Gibson, best-selling author of A Dowry of Blood, is correct. All of the sensuality and the decadence and everything that she brings into her books is exactly how she moves through the world, used to fuel profound abundance and generosity and beauty for everybody she encounters. And I have been a beneficiary of that for over a decade. And I know that I can show up to Saint however I am, and I will be met with the same hospitality. So yeah, I thought the people should know.
That's incredibly kind. That is the kindest thing in the entire world. And I hope that I am able to rise to the occasion of your experience of me consistently, because that is the person that I want to be in the world. So I feel like, to be loved is to be known. So I'm going to take your word for that and accept it with love. Truly a privilege to be on this spinning rock with you.
You go studying, you want to keep being friends?
You want to go study and keep being friends? Oh God, I'll see if I can pencil you in. We'll have to call my assistant. This has been A Physical Girl. And if you enjoyed what you heard here today, please do not forget to like and comment and follow in your preferred podcast platform, because it does really help this show and our longevity. We are a listener-supported podcast, so any enthusiasm and love you can throw our way is really great. Be safe and well until we two meet again.
I feel like I could die and I'd be like, okay, my legacy is out there. You know what I mean?
You did it.
That was such
You
a
did it.
crystallization of everything I care about.
Thank God. It's all the things that I like and care about. I think it was a great app.